Have you ever thought if you just had a little bit more money, then you'd be happy? Or maybe if you were rich, then you could be really happy. Well, this is one of the most common themes and probably one of the most common misconceptions that mankind has had since the earliest of times. It was this theme that money cannot buy happiness that Russell Conwell made quite a handsome living off of. Russell Conwell was born before the Civil War. He served in the Civil War, even met President Lincoln on one occasion. And when the war was over, he went traveling. And as he was overseas, he was on one particular adventure that was guided by an old Bedouin who was not all that thrilled to be leading around the young Mr. Conwell on this tour. As a matter of fact, this old tour guide would have a habit of telling Russell Conwell different stories that always seemed to have a moral that was pointed at him. And that moral essentially was that maybe he could be doing something better with his time than idling away his time and his money just touring the world. And it was during one of these stories that Russell Conwell got the acres of diamond idea from. And it involved this. The old guide told Russell Conwell about a man by the name of Hafed. Hafed lived in India. And he lived on a pretty nice property in a nice home. And it was said of Hafed that he was rich and contented. He was content because he was wealthy, and he was wealthy because he was content. Well, all that changed one day when a priest came through and stayed over at Hafed's home. And that priest told Hafed about diamonds. He said, if you had a nice diamond, it could have enough value to make you rich just with the one diamond. And he said, well, if you had a mine filled with diamonds, the wealth and influence that could buy would be enough to set your heirs upon thrones. Well, Hafed, we're told, went to bed that night poor and discontented. He was discontent because he thought he was poor, and now he was poor because he was now discontent. Well, he got up early the next morning. He couldn't sleep, and he rushed to that priest. And he said, tell me where I can find diamonds. And the priest said, what do you want diamonds for? And he said, I want to be wealthy. And so the priest said, well, it's pretty easy. You just find a couple of mountains where they meet and look for the valley in between. And in that valley, there will be a river. And under that river will be white sands. And within those white sands, you'll find diamonds. Well, Hafed thanked the priest, and after the priest left, it wasn't too long after that Hafed sold his property and went in search of diamonds. He spent years searching for diamonds. Finally, he ran out of the money that he had from the sale of his property. He was completely broke. He was utterly despondent to the point where he despaired of life and eventually took his own life. Well, meanwhile, back at the ranch, as the saying goes, the man who bought Hafed's property was out surveying the property, looking at it. And I don't know what kind of animal he was riding. It was a camel or a donkey. Anyway, the beast was thirsty, and so he stopped by this stream on his newly acquired property, and that animal just kind of nosed through the white sands as it was getting a drink and unturned a pretty shiny rock. And so the new owner took that pretty shiny rock and he set it by his fireplace to dry, and he forgot about it, went about his business on his property. Well, it wasn't too long after that this priest came through again on his regular tour. And the man invited him in, and he sat him down by the fireplace, and the priest got really excited. He said, a diamond. Hafed has found diamonds. Has Hafed returned? And the man said, no, he hadn't returned, and that's not a diamond. It's just a rock I found out in the stream. And the priest said, well, he may not have returned, but that's a diamond. Well, the two rushed out to where the man had found this diamond within his stream, and it was just filled with diamonds underneath those white sands. This discovery became the Golconda diamond mine. It was one of the most wealthy diamond mines in the history of mankind. The crowned jewels of England, many came from this particular Golconda mine. As a matter of fact, the most famous mine of its time, the Koh-i-Noor diamond, came from the Golconda mine. And the interesting thing is that it was sold by a man who was looking for diamonds and looking for wealth so that he could buy happiness. And he left his own home, sold everything he had, spent the rest of his life in toil and despair, not realizing for a moment that these diamonds and, in fact, happiness lay in his own backyard. Well, this is the way a lot of us are in life, isn't it? We think if we could just be rich, just for a little bit, then we'd be happy. We could do all those things we've always dreamed of doing. We could buy the things that we can't afford to buy now, and that would make us happy. But contentment, true happiness, and certainly genuine wealth has never come from money. In Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 4, King Solomon, who had been given more wisdom than any man had ever been given by God, said this. He said, "Don't wear yourself out to become rich. Have the wisdom to show restraint." Well, King Solomon knew what he was talking about. He was the wealthiest man of his era. In addition to his wisdom, he had wealth, he had power, he had fame, and none of these things brought him happiness. It was only his relationship with God that could do that. And because Solomon was so distracted with these other physical pursuits, his relationship with God wasn't always what it should have been. Well, it was about 1,000 years after this, now during the Apostle Paul's time. And in 1 Timothy chapter 6, the Lord inspired the Apostle Paul to write this. It begins in verse 6. And he says, "Godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that." And then listen to this. People who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. Have you ever noticed that? There are some people in your life that you probably are aware of that seem to be completely focused upon money. They work themselves nearly to death. They're not often at home with their families. They deny themselves all sorts of just everyday pleasures because they are in pursuit of that almighty dollar. Why are they doing that? Well, I suppose there's a lot of reasons that people pursue money, but in the end, it's security and it's happiness that they think money will bring. But it's that pursuit of money that's a trap. It plunges men into destruction. It's only those people who have their priorities right that are going to enjoy true wealth in life. It's only those people who have absolutely devoted themselves to becoming a servant of Christ and a servant of God that are going to find true contentment. Because godliness with contentment is great gain. If you've ever known somebody, maybe they don't have a lot of money, but they always just seem to be happy. It doesn't seem like anything really phases them. They seem content with life. Have you ever asked yourself why? Well, it's very likely it's because of their relationship that they have with God. And when a person has a good relationship with God, when a person is a Christian and is truly trying to apply the Christian principles to their life, then they have a really good relationship with others, with their spouses, with their children, with their friends. They seem to be a benefit everywhere they go, a benefit to the company they work for, a benefit to the neighbors that they have, a benefit to the community in which they live. And again, it's because they are trying to do what God wants them to do. And when we do that, we find great contentment. It's sad to see so many people who are depressed in life. They're unhappy in life. And so many of these people are just absolutely convinced it's because they don't have wealth. That the rich men are keeping all the money to themselves. And if they could just get part of that wealth, well, then they would be happy. But again, that's not where real contentment comes from. Contentment is a state of mind that doesn't come from external sources, at least not external physical sources. True contentment comes from within, for those who have Christ within their hearts. And when you and I are absolutely determined to serve God to the best of our ability in His way, whether we're really rich in money or whether we don't have quite as much as maybe we'd like some days, we're still going to be content. But when we get our focus mixed up, when we start pursuing wealth, well, we fall into the same dangers that Hafed found himself in. A man who was formerly content because he thought he was wealthy became discontented because he decided he didn't have enough money. That can happen to us too. What we need to do is wake up to the fact that the true source of wealth isn't located in some far-off place that we have to go searching for. It's right there in our own backyard. As a matter of fact, the source of true contentment is found within the pages of the Word of God. And if we will read His Word, and if we'll apply it to our lives, and if we'll really turn our lives over to He and to Christ, well, we're going to have a content life. But if we don't, if all we do is pursue physical things with money at the head of that list, well, at some point, we may get a little bit ahead. We might even think that we might be winning the rat race for a while. But those who win the rat race, really the only thing they become is the chief of the rats. And who wants to be that? For those who will be content with what they have, I'm not suggesting for a moment that they're not trying to better themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. But for those who are content in their service to God, they're going to be the happiest people on the face of the earth. And that has very little to do with physical things, but it has everything to do with your spiritual state. Are you a Christian? Are you pursuing godliness? If so, then you know that's the source of great gain and the source of contentment. If you don't have it, I'd encourage you to start looking for it. And if you do have it, I would encourage you not to lose focus of that and start becoming discontented because you don't have some of the physical things, but to truly be appreciative and thankful for what you do have. The Christian life really is the best. And then someday there's heaven. It's a pretty good deal when you think about it. Well, thank you for tuning in today. I really appreciate your listening. Hope you'll come back tomorrow. God bless.